Now, in my case, I consider myself to be extremely lucky. My father's parents were born in Russia, and they escaped religious persecution and with no money came to this country. And just imagine, they came from a very small village of 5,000 people in what is now Belarus, and they both wound up in Fort Worth, Texas, one going through Galveston and one going through New York. They got married. My father and his brothers and sisters are the result, and it's obvious that I'm the son. My mother's great-grandparents came from Germany in the 1830s and 1840s and went to Kansas City. And through a whole host of stories, her father came to Fort Worth, Texas, married a bride, went back home, got married in Kansas City, came back to Fort Worth, then my mother and father met. Now, why do I consider myself so lucky? Well, it's obvious. My grandparents could have stayed in Germany and I would not be alive. My other grandparents could have stayed in Russia, I wouldn't be alive. If my parents had not met in Fort Worth, I obviously wouldn't be alive. And my mother was a musician. Now, how lucky is that? To be a Texan, to be from Fort Worth, to go to Paschal High School, and to have a musical family. In those days, nobody watched television because there was no television, so we used to sing. My mother played music when she was pregnant with me in utero before I was born. Now, today, some parents do that, but she did that in 1937. She played Mozart and classical music either on the Victrola or played herself because she was a pianist and also played the accordion when I was 1, 2, and 3 years old, and then I started taking lessons when I was 3. I sang for the family. In junior high school, I went into a choir. The reason why I'm not a soloist is I was selected from the choir in the 7th grade to be the soloist, and during the performance, I forgot the words. And that was enough to tell me that I shouldn't be a soloist. And I needed the support of a choral group, and I became a choral singer. And you've already heard the rest of it. I sang in junior high school, and at the University of Texas, and then later I sang in an alumni group, and we traveled to Europe, etc. So how has this background helped me? The smartest business consultant from Harvard Business School that I ever met once said to me casually, "Choral singing is the purest form of community that exists." He was not a singer. He was not a musician. And he didn't know I was a choral singer. He just said it. And that made a big impression on me, and I started thinking about it, and then I used to do speeches in business, and I started to take apart, why was this true? And the answer is pretty obvious, but I'm going to state some of the characteristics. When you sing in a choral group, there's no such thing as an individual star. As a matter of fact, the blending is the power. And you've got to carry your weight for the group or the community, but you can't stick out on the high side or the low side. So you learn teamwork. And the rehearsals take a lot of effort. You have to memorize and study, and then you have to put feeling into it. And if you're lucky, you'll have a great choral conductor, and I've been lucky in my life. The very things that I learned in junior high school, college, and afterwards, I applied in business. And the choral units and experience that I had was one of the reasons why I could understand how groups functioned better than computer science people, engineers, etc. So I've got a lot of stories, but I've got limited time, so I won't go into them. One of the things that interested me is Chorus America, a national service organization in D.C., Washington, D.C., produced the results of a survey, and it indicated the following: that choral singers are better citizens, more likely to vote, do volunteer work, do better in school, and are better human beings than people who don't sing in choruses. Now that sounds a little self-serving, or more than a little self-serving. But I would say this: my experience is, just like we heard from Dr. Eder, that the people that self-select and go into choral groups and sing and do music composition or into performance or symphony or opera or any of the music, and also it blends over into art, they self-select, very smart people, and they get synapses put together so that they're able to comprehend things that normal people don't. In 1979, I was asked to chair a committee to try to figure out what to do with the question of, do we need a new symphony hall in Dallas? And for reasons which I never quite understood, I was on the board of the Dallas Symphony, and I was asked to chair this committee. I had spent all my time being a father, a husband, and a member of my company, and I didn't spend any time in the community until this point. This is 1979. I had just become president of EDS, and I took the job on. And what I discovered was that in building the Symphony Hall, which was a 10-year cycle, the selection of the architect and the selection of the acoustician, we made a decision that instead of letting one work for the other, which is the standard way to do this, we had both of them report to our committee, and I became the ultimate arbitrator between the arguments between acoustics and architecture or aesthetics. And it really fascinated me that in building the hall, which was a 10-year project, it was the same thing as doing computer systems. And then later, with Peter O'Donnell, I served on a commission at the state of Texas to try to win and bring the superconducting supercollider to Texas. And the same thing was true. So architecture to me was frozen music. It was beautiful, but it was static. And yet the music inside was vibrant and dynamic. Same thing was true with physics, and the same thing is true in business. So take it from me that what you're studying and practicing now will have impacts on you, and I wish for you that you've had the good fortune that I've had. Thank you very much.
We would like to open this for questions to either of these gentlemen. And Mrs. Moore, you know, before we do that, I feel strongly that I would like to introduce and give thanks to these people, because Mrs. O'Donnell stood up a moment ago. Mr. O'Donnell is here also, and we owe them a great debt of thanks for what they do for us. So please give thanks to Mr. and Mrs. O'Donnell. They're right here.